Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome to The Print and welcome to this edition of The Print Soft Cover, where we have an interesting book on a very interesting leader. She's one of the most influential leaders that we have in the 21st century, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. And this is a HarperCollins publication. We have both the authors with us, Supriya Vani and Carl Hart. Just to introduce about the authors, Supriya, you're a journalist, you're an author, you're a peace activist. You've interviewed about 60 Nobel Peace laureates, and that's an achievement in itself. And Carl, you have been, you're a writer, you're also an actor, which is quite interesting. And you've also worked with several other authors, like even former President APJ Abdul Kalam.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation, but let's just start with the book first again. When I got, this book in my hand, I thought, okay, being a journalist and I cover diplomacy, I know everything about this leader, right? The Christchurch attacks when it happened, when she got elected. So I was like, what is it new? And I'm being honest about it. What is it new that I'll, get to learn from the book? But when you really read the book and you go chapter after chapter, you understand that there's so much in her life, layer after layer, that you really did not know anything about her. So that's the fantastic part of it. But I'll start, as you've also started in the book, with her early life, right? Her parents, the influence of her paternal aunt, how she came into politics, how education was very important during her growing up years. So, Supriya, you can start and you can tell us, and probably Carl, you can also then give some, nice shade to it.
One thing which I really want to stress on this is that why this book came out is because it was mainly because of my own like whatever qualities I could sense from all the Nobel Peace Prize winners, all the women Nobel laureates, when I was working on my previous book, Battling Injustice, 16 women Nobel laureates. So I kind of sensed, what are like about women leadership, that how important it is to have that women leadership. And people often just say, okay, feminism is good, but no, I wanted to do beyond that, and for like Jacinda's story, why is this important? Because I have interviewed some other women presidents and like presidents as well. But there's something very different about that. She is very grounded, number one. And when she talks about her childhood, the one interesting fact which I definitely want to highlight is that I asked her, what do you wanted to become when you were a child? So she said, I wanted to become a clown. So I said, why you wanted to become a clown? So she said, because I wanted to make children laugh. And I'm telling you that I'm just being very, very brief about it. But the amount of emotions a woman can actually sense from this statement that a sitting prime minister is saying that I want to become a clown. Why? Because she wanted to make children happy. And she came into politics for the sake of children. And that's the statement she gave. Why? Because she used to cry seeing children without shoes as a kid. So I think Ross Ardern, her father, played a very important influence, and and of course her mother as well. So I think this is the family values that they don't change because now that doesn't change with your status, and they just stay put and so I think this is the message that we want to convey to the women of India, to the mothers, that yes, compassion is the basic essence, and we women are the creators in some way. I do feel like that, and it is our moral responsibility to actually carry on this legacy of compassion and like leadership. So that's why I think sharing her story and like inspiring young girls is just the root of this book.
Right.
And if I can just take up on that point with her parents. What's interesting about Jacinda is that she's highly influenced by her father, not just her mother. And I find that very interesting because for a long time, I think there's been a lack of focus on the father's role in a daughter's upbringing. And what we see here is that Jacinda is very much her father's daughter. She's very much her mother's daughter too. But we can see Ross's influence in her, even in her choice of career. He's actually an administrator. He's a leader himself. In actual fact, he's a leader of a small New Zealand protectorate, in a sense. So I find that really fascinating, because what we have is a situation where we have a young girl who's identified with her mother, but equally identified very strongly with her father. And that's significant for men to realize that their daughters are looking for them, not just their mothers, for direction. And that's a lesson to take from the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So if I can ask you also, the role played by her paternal aunt, right, Marie Arden, I think that also had a lot of influence in her life. And, later on also, when she grew up and when she started facing the real challenges of the real world, I think that also came as an inspiration. Can you shed some light on that as well?
Well, I think it's quite interesting to say that Jacinda says her family were not overly political. And that's sort of true in terms of her mother and father. Right. But the rest of the family are very political. She has cousins, two distant cousins, who one is in Parliament and another is a mayor. Or one was in Parliament, I should say, a very prominent parliamentarian, Shane Ardern. But if we look back to her grandmother, her grandmother, Gladys, was, as she said, the real political animal of the family. And she was an absolute Labor stalwart. And this lady, I think, has really influenced the whole family. She's made them a Labor family, if you like. So, yes, and that's gone down through the women in the family. I think the women in the family are a particularly strong lot. And I think that's
even the sister of like Jacinda Ardern, Louise Ardern, is like headstrong. And I had an opportunity to actually speak to her, and she was like that I'm raising my children in a way that they, she's having one son and one daughter. So so she's making sure that her son is also doing the basic like home chores, and he is like equally washing the dishes and doing the, clothing and, pressing things and all. So it's just so like important that she is raising both the same, both the children in the same fashion. And not just like, oh, girls are just going to do the homework, like household work, and the boys are not going to do. So that's not the case with this family.
Right.
And I think that's a very strong point in the Ardern family. The girls were never brought up as you are girls or you're limited by your gender. And I think partly that's a generational issue. They were the first of that generation where they saw women leaders in government. But I think it's also a choice in the family on some level to say you're free to do what you want. It's not, they're not a particularly feministic family, or they're not particularly political or ideological. It's just, I think the two parents, Ross and Laurel, made sure that the two daughters were free to express themselves. And I think that's fantastic. And that's the way it should be. It doesn't have to be ideological, because as Mormons, I think they might have been a little conservative.
Not anymore, I think. She was like campaigning for the gay rights, and and she left the church because she felt that the church was, had some were like biased towards the gay people. So obviously, it's like taking some strong stance, and that's not very
absolutely.
Common. Yeah.
I mean, fighting for LGBTQ rights at that time is not easy. It's not even easy today.
It's definitely not easy.
Societal backlash and many other things that you have, at least for a woman, it's not easy. Even whether it's New Zealand or it's India.
Yeah, any country in the world. Yeah. And she's a huge, fan of Mahatma Gandhi as well.
Mm-hmm.
She is.
So, now, if I can come to the fact that she's done a lot of things, right? She's worked with the Harry Potter film franchise. And then she worked with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. And that's actually, I think, she started.
But they never met.
They never met, yes. And
no.
But then, and the fact that, she then understood, probably is what I get the feeling, how, the trials and tribulations in the political world globally is not that easy. And that's when I think she took this kind of thing onto herself that, no matter what, people will be first for me, right? And then the influence that she had from former Prime Minister Helen Clark and others. Can you elaborate that a bit? Because that I found was very inspirational. I mean, for any other, even if you're not a women leader or something like that, but it is quite, inspiring.
In terms of seeing the world, she's seen the world. Yes, she, as a leader of the International Union of Socialist Youth, she did go out and see some of the trouble spots in the world. She even came to India at one stage.
Yeah.
I don't think she did very much for the Harry Potter franchise. I think it went as far as an audition and she got rejected. That's the story anyway.
Yeah.
But she was...
and then she went to London. That's fascinating.
Yes, she went on. Yes.
Yes, London. Well, I mean, I think
and then she took her teacher, Gregor Fountain there, and Gregor Fountain is her college, principal, and he had a great influence on Jacinda's mindset. Right. So I think in like terms of children, also I just want to highlight this phase that fact that in all her past parliamentary speeches, when she was not the prime minister, when she was just, trying to get up to the ladder, all her speeches, majority, 80% of her speeches were about child rights. So she has been really, really, really working hard, to like help children. And she made a very huge statement that she wants to make New Zealand as the safest place for a child to be in. So she wants to ensure that. That's why she is, headstrong about the rights of children.
And I think that goes way back to her early childhood in Murupara, when you had those very difficult times in the 1980s with Rogernomics, when there was privatization, job losses, the shutting down of railways, post offices and the like. And I think it goes back to that time when she saw a lot of, suffering. And I think it's interesting.
Inequality, unemployment,
yes,
and that kind of impacted her mind.
Yes,
that I got to do something about it. And then
and children suffering.
Interestingly, there was a school contest, and so they were all deciding that who was gonna be what in like tenure or something. So there was like Jacinda Ardern, the future Prime Minister of New Zealand, and I think it just manifested. To be very honest, it just happened. And believe me or not, even the other people, some of her like classmates were okay, this girl is gonna get married and have 2 kids, and that happened. So I think this is kind of a voodoo thing over there. Whatever was.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see that children in year 12 at that age, they have such good judgment about what their people are going to do.
Exactly.
But I do think that she said, I mean, when she was 16, she apparently said, "I am going to be the first woman prime minister." She said that.
Yes.
But when she was 17, that was taken away from her because we had Jenny Shipley come to power. But in a sense she did take on that ambition. But what I also find interesting is that she did have ambition all along. There's no doubt about it that she had an ambition from very early to get into politics, to make a difference. But when she saw what the job was in I think it was 2005 for the election, she saw exactly how difficult it was to be prime minister. She saw all the stress, and she said, I don't want this. I want to be a minister. But still that ambition, she's got a very interesting ambivalence. And we cover this in the book about ambition. She's not, she's ambitious. You have to be ambitious to become a top politician. Otherwise you wouldn't be there. But at the same time, you have to lead with
compassion. At the same point of time, you have to lead with compassion. And that's the essence, because we have other world leaders who like do have a different persona, like
a very different persona,
different from Jacinda Ardern. Markle is different in her own way.
I was about to come to that. When you operate in this sort of alpha male environment, and
Trump, etc. Putin and Trump.
Representing a party with socialist values, a Labour Party, and people will not really accept you at the very first instance if you're not siding with the biggies and the corporates. So I think that really something touches you, right? When you understand that, as a leader, and as you rightly mentioned in the book title, Leading with Empathy, you need to really have that empathy inside you from the very beginning. It's just, this is nothing that you gain suddenly. You have to be a leader.
Exactly. And I also want to make a very, very, very strong point here. I have seen, it's just a general statement, but I do feel that some of the Indian ministers or even the ministers here in US or anywhere, they're very high-headed. The moment they become something or say a governor or someone or a prime minister, they will just act like, that they're very strong-headed. Okay, they're, no one can reach us. We are, they'll just have a lot of people to actually, fix their appointments and all that. So they just make themselves so unapproachable. And Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leader of USSR.
You interviewed him as well, right?
I got an endorsement from him because I was headstrong, because he made one statement. He said, if the young leaders do not support the young people, sorry, I'm like framing it wrong. If the leaders of the world do not support the young leaders, then who else will? And I asked the same question to him, to his office. I said, if we don't get support from the leaders, like you, then where else we should go? You have Nobel Peace Prize, you have, everything like under the, so we want something like, and that is the essence which I felt in Jacinda Ardern as well. Why Jacinda Ardern? Because she's an absolute example that you can be a woman politician, that you can be a tough politician, but you can also lead with compassion. So you don't have to conceited mindset that, ooh la la, I am so big for you. This kind of mindset. And I am literally talking sense in this way. I've seen people, Kala, definitely you will agree on this, that people really, forget the basic compassion, and they like try to make themselves so unavailable.
I think that you're 100% correct. I think that actually compassion is sometimes seen as something that's incompatible with politics, with leadership. Absolutely. Especially these days when you have to make difficult decisions. But where it's different with Jacinda is she's found not only can you be effective and compassionate, your compassion and empathy, if it's channeled in the right way and if it's balanced, it can actually help you do a better job. And that's a bit of a revelation, because I think we've all been indoctrinated in this idea that we need tough leaders in tough times.
Yeah, exactly.
And what we found in New Zealand is this: New Zealand has had a very tough time, and in each one of these crises, by being compassionate, by being firm and compassionate, and being empathetic, she's leading the country through these difficult times with grace. And even the people who don't support Labor are saying she's doing a good job. Now, that is amazing, because what we've become used to is the Putins and the Trumps and the Xis and whoever else. We're used to strong, powerful, masculine leaders. And what we can see with Jacinda is there's another option. There's an entirely different option where you can be empathetic, you can be sensitive, you can be humble, but also make good policy decisions.
That is the reason Oprah Winfrey made a statement that we need to awaken our inner Jacindas in us. So by Jacinda, she only means the compassion and the womanhood. And that's the message of our, book, that we are enough, and like we women can actually, it's just, I just want to give a direction, to the young girls, because in India, the female feticide rate is definitely high. And this is something very, this is a very sensitive topic. So I want to give a hope to all the young girls who just feel that their wings are being clipped, like somewhere, like all over the world, it's just, only the ratio, varies, but the basic idea is that they can also become something if they really set their mind to it. And just giving.
And on top of that, they don't have to be. They can be themselves. They don't have to say, okay, well, I'll have to lower my voice, such as Maggie Thatcher did. Margaret
and
Thatcher
you don't have
lowered
to
her
go
voice.
on with a silver spoon to actually, go up the ladder.
Yeah.
You don't need, all that kind of sophisticated families and this and that, and, royal families or whatever. You can be whatever you are and can still go up and do something incredible so that people can remember you.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, whenever you talk about women leaders, the first impression that earlier used to come to your mind is that of German Chancellor, right? Chancellor Merkel. And now
yes.
we have Jacinda with the more, I would say, I mean, I really am a fan of Chancellor Merkel, but Jacinda,
I am too. I love her.
Woman with a baby in hand, and you have to manage motherhood. I remember her giving an interview to BBC where she was asked, why is your daughter not with you in the studio? So it's like we can relate to her more, is what I meant to say.
Yes, she hasn't changed herself. She hasn't altered her. The authenticity is there.
Yeah,
she's actually
up as if, okay, family is there, but I'm the strong leader who has to lead, so let's not talk about family. That's not true. That at certain point looks quite fake, because you exist, and your family also backs you up, so you always need them. And as a mother, you realize that you have to also be accountable to your children when they grow up. They will also question your policy decisions. How have you been as a leader, right? And when you are in all the time in the limelight. So now let me just ask you this thing about Jacinda mania, right? So, it's been this, and I really love the chapter's name, Stardust and Jacinda mania. So we have these leaders like Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. We have, at that time, President Obama, and then there came Donald Trump. We have Merkel. So in this, suddenly this fresh new face comes in, and there is this Jacinda mania. So if you can tell me, Supriya, and then probably Carl, you can tell me, how has it been for her to handle this and absorb this, right? Because the moment you get that fame globally, that thing comes into your head, right? That, oh, okay, I'm this, mania, I'm the trendsetter. But she really overcame all of that, and she knows that, okay, this is my work speaking for itself. So let that not, guide me all the time. But yet, that thing is, that aura about her is always there. So if you can speak something on that.
I just want to give a little background to it. In 2017, when she was not even pregnant, I had this idea. I don't know why. I just felt that I need to get this woman. So I was like, I don't know. At that time, the Christchurch, episode was, was not there and nothing. She was not, but I was having this kind of constant thoughts about her, that there is something about this woman. I don't know, maybe it's just her face, or maybe
translated very well in the book. I mean, after reading the book, it feels like I have met her. So
yeah, exactly.
Now that's what we want. That's really what we want. That's what Supriya and I have been trying to get. So thank you for the compliment.
Exactly. So when I thought about interviewing her, so she and then I had to wait for like 1 year because she was actually pregnant during that time, and during that and then the Christchurch episode happened, afterwards, and her response to the Christchurch episode really made me believe, okay, why? Because there are some good leaders also, but the way you speak, if you can shake the souls of the people, then you are a good leader. I mean, if I know I'm just going to bring like another topic in this, but if you hear any old speech of Martin Luther King Jr. and see him speaking, you get goosebumps, or maybe JFK, ask not what your country can do for yourself, or something like that. It just gives you a goosebump. You feel motivated. And this is what I felt from Jacinda, that it's just the way she speaks. It's not about being a good speaker. There are plenty of good speakers. It's about touching human souls. It's just like, okay, she is one of us. So it's just about the amount of compassion which just flows out smoothly. She doesn't have to fake it. It's just so innate in her. And that eases you. And that, okay, that you are one. So I think I think when you speak and when you speak with your heart, people will sell, because you know what I mean, people will definitely appreciate you. And that's why I think Jacinda Mania, it's just primarily because the way she deals with it, because she did not name the person, she did not name the terrorist who was responsible for the, you know, for the Christ. She said, I do not want to give her any I do not want to give him any importance by even naming him. And that's a very strong stand. Vinny even refused to name him. It's like he does not exist. And yes, he does not. So I think the way she reacted to it speaks volumes about her personality, volumes. So that's why I think that like everyone could actually connect, because we all speak the language of love, isn't it?
Very true.
Can I just add to that,
Yes.
Supriya? I feel also too, as someone from the southern countries, I'm Australian. Australia and New Zealand have a liking for a dearth of airs and graces. We don't like people that have too much of a big head. So what you see, particularly in New Zealand, is you see humility is something that's valued. I mean, we do have people with big egos. I mean, they're everywhere. But this kind of humility that Jacinda has, I think that's very much New Zealand. That's very much New Zealand. And I think if anybody is going to, if anyone in New Zealand is going to get a little bit big-headed, the New Zealanders will be very quick to pull them back into their place. I think that's generally just the way it goes in the Antipodean countries, if I may say so.
But the worldwide Jacinda Mania is like primarily how she reacted to the COVID crisis in our country, to the Christchurch, and to all her speeches.
Yes, well, she's there's something that is very unusual about Jacinda is her authenticity. Because there are a lot of politicians who speak nicely, who look good, but then we find out that somewhere in the background there's something that isn't quite right.
I'm actually talking about the depth, the way you talk.
Absolutely,
but you cannot really copy depth. How do
you can't copy depth. Absolutely, you can't.
Martin Luther King Jr.
You can't fake that. And all of Jacinda's people, they say what you see is what you get. And I think that by being herself, she's actually saved herself a lot of trouble, because she's not putting on an act. This really is her.
Yes,
so
yes, that's it, yes.
Apparently, from what we can see and from everything that everybody's told us, she is as she seems. You don't have a private Jacinda and then a public Jacinda and then a party Jacinda or whatever.
And then your policy says some other Jacinda, right? Because that's what we see in our leaders. You talk big, you promise big, and when ultimately you take the policy decision, something else comes out, which you can't relate. And that's happening.
Yeah. Well, this is that's where this authenticity and honesty comes in. And I think it's there within her in any case. But also, if we look at her mentors, they were fairly much the same. We didn't see Helen Clark making huge promises she couldn't keep. She was honest, and I think that's important, because the authenticity doesn't look authentic anymore if somebody breaks their word.
I do want to mention the point of a very important point about the role of teachers in shaping the future of students. Very, very important. Like people, teachers, they just miss this kind of very important. Parents are important, but so are teachers, and her teachers. I've spoken to all, all the teachers who were kind of, had an influence on Jacinda's mind. And now what they're doing, they have always been helping students and, trying to give Gandhian values to them and so many other things. And so I now feel that it's because I think her teachers also played a very important role. So we can't just give her the entire credit to the parents, for sure, 100% credit to the parents. But there is a very, very important factor to mention, that her teachers, her school teachers, college teachers, and the principals, They're very nice, they're very grounded, and what they're doing is that they're trying to give moral value education lessons to their students.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that incredible that I mean, the teachers are also of the same mindset. So I think
it's interesting to note something that we can bring this back to India to some extent with Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He bonded very strongly with his teachers. There were several teachers that he bonded very strongly with.
And then we have a culture
with
to
Jacinda
respect
too.
Our teachers equally to our
right
parents.
from primary school till till the time you have your university teachers as well. I mean,
yes. All the way through. All the way through.
That was very true for Dr. Kalam. Absolutely.
Yes.
So now let me really come to the Christchurch attack incident, right? That fateful day of 15 March 2019. And the way you've described it in the book, I really thought that I know everything about it because I was also covering it whatever little way we could from India. But the minor details that how she, stopped her entire day schedule, got this thing, and she went back to the police station where things have happened, and then she realized, the intensity of it, and eventually how she sort of managed it, as you rightly said, Supriya, by not naming the terrorist. Yet she took some very bold actions in terms of controlling online extremism. And I was listening to one of her at that time. She gave an interview to Christian Amanpour, where she talked about how she really intends to make this a law, and it's not something that she just said for the heck of it. She actually acted on it by taking on Facebook and Twitter and others. And basically, if you can describe, both of you, when you've spoken to her, that challenge was really, it was a sudden thing for her. And at that time, globally also things were really not looking good. There were tensions going on in India, Pakistan as well. Other side also, we have these tensions all the time. At that time also, Israel-Palestine things were going on. So how was it, how difficult was it for her to not to really name the terrorists when we've seen the tendency to suddenly name the terrorists, go into a specific religion, and, suddenly talk about jihad and other things. And that's when leaders think that, we need to speak about this so that, people get...
I actually asked her this question verbatim. I did ask this question, but unfortunately the answer is not included in the book. And I was very adamant to include that answer because, my idea, and that's just my own personal perception, is not just to have one biography. It's about something beyond a biography. And that's about important topics like nuclear weapons, like, ban on gun violence and all that, about this, like blaming religions. And I did ask her question, and I would love to send you her like verbatim answer, on that. And you will understand, she said, she started, as far my memory is concerned, because I am not having the transcript in my hand, but she said for small countries like New Zealand, United Nations matters. And I said that, what are you planning to do, to actually, are you planning to do something about the international nuclear ban? Because there's always a threat. And that's beyond gun violence, and what are you trying to do to actually stop the gun violence in your home country? And so she said that we are going to do, and she also said, it's very easy to blame people. It is very easy to blame religion, but I don't see the world like this. So she did say, I don't really remember her exact words, but I do remember the essence of that. And that was that it's very easy to blame people, but beyond it, that what is incredibly important is that we have to go beyond it and let humanity speak. So I think humanity is the only religion which she was trying to stress. And of course, passing strict laws so that it doesn't happen again. So this will all funnel down to one more important point, that Jacinda Ardern herself wrote a book about moral values. And she could have gone to Penguin or Harper or like any other, the traditional publishing house, but she chose the foundation of Nelson Mandela to actually publish that book. Why? Because of the humanitarian values, and it's just like 50 pages of a book. So all I'm saying is just, like everything boils down to a point that she is adamant to pass these laws, against the gun violence, against racism, and again all the kind of basic inequalities. And because she is headstrong about it, and also about gender equality. So
She's done a lot on that. Recently, they brought in New Zealand some leave for women who've had a miscarriage, which I think is only sensible. There are a whole lot of small but very sensible and avant-garde policies that she's bringing in, that when you think about them, you think these policies should already exist, but she's been the one to bring them in. Small but simple policies like that. And the thing that I find quite special about Jacinda is that with this humanitarian sense, there's also a pragmatic side. There's also a practical side. So with guns, she was keen to say, well, we do actually still have a need for guns in New Zealand to control feral animals. Right. Because, of course, we have in New Zealand and Australia, we have a lot of feral animals that cause a lot of damage to the environment. So she sees a broader picture as well as just the humanitarian side. It's interesting that she manages to be a decent administrator as well as have the humanitarian concerns and weigh them up and manage to get them to come into the middle and get something to work.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And for people like us, in India, we just think that, why can't we just stop gun violence there? Why can't we just ban? But as you rightly said, Carl, that, in places like New Zealand, you really need to have a gun for some other factor, which we don't really sometimes relate to it.
But in US, we can get a gun for like $20 and just take a life. And this is a very bad reality.
Walk down the street, yes. Just down
$20 and you have a gun.
Yes.
And so it's just, the gun violence, violence is not accepted and can never be accepted in any form. This is what I feel.
No, I completely agree to that. But if I can also ask you to speak a little bit on the fact that, one day suddenly we saw her wearing a hijab. And everybody questioned it. Some criticized, some praised, but nobody really understood why she did that. Even the Naima Abdi incident, right? Which finally, as you said, that, and the way it was projected on Burj Khalifa, and it was, for us, it's like everything was new and, too much was coming in as to some people said that, she did this to grab the headlines. But no, now when you actually read the book, you realize it is herself. This is how.
But actually, she has worn a hijab before. She wore one when she was in Algeria. There's a picture of her doing a radio interview wearing a hijab.
And I would definitely take this question. And Angelina Jolie is such a great Hollywood actress and she's such a good humanitarian, we all know that. And she has crossed some 20, 30 countries and she's always into hijab and no one questions about her. Why? And it's just about respecting the traditions. And that's all was in her Jacinda's mind. This is what I feel. And this is, when she went to the Muslim communities, it's out of respect that she wore the hijab. It's just not about catching the headline. She's already a prime minister. She don't need extra attention, from people to make stories.
So effortlessly, you could make.
Yeah, you do it effortlessly, and that's the reason that I had to mention Angelina Jolie, because she's also such a well-known actor. She is more of an activist than an actor, and she goes to Afghanistan, she goes to Pakistan, India, and all those countries, and if she's going to that kind of area where there's Muslim population, she will definitely, wear a hijab, and it's out of respect. So it's just a simple thing to understand that it's just out of respect and just to be graceful. And also when she went to temple, Jacinda Ardern, to actually celebrate Janmashtami. at a Hindu temple. So, she was wearing a beautiful red dress, and, she was doing all the aartis. So it's just, respecting the Hindu culture there. So I think it's just about, being like respectful and nothing more. And why would somebody get into that kind of framework, that, okay, I need some kind of publicity and, I would just pull this. And that too, when you're, when you know that you have lost some like 50, 60 lives. I mean, like after the Christchurch, no, this is no time to make such kind of shady, kind of tricks to actually get attention.
I think overwhelmingly people were positive towards her wearing the hijab.
Yes.
The opposition were positive. Judith Collins was, praised her for it in Parliament. So I think mostly New Zealanders were very happy with her performance there in terms of diplomatically. But I think it's just sincerity. I think it's just, as Supriya says, respecting another's tradition and showing that they are us with her
they are us. You are, we are all one and speaking the language of humanity.
Mm-hmm. So if I can ask you, whenever you've interacted, both of you, and, you've many things I'm sure you could not write in the book, some things that, the feelings that you get when you talk with somebody, not everything that you can write. Do you really think, that's been her belief all the time, that let's not just, discriminate people based on religion or race or whatever. Let's just be human, right? And be compassionate. And the fact that just not do that so that you can be this great leader, but do that through your work as well.
I think it's consistent from her childhood. I mean, I've looked very carefully at I've looked at it for myself, and Supriya's looked at it for herself. I mean, with a biography, there's always only so much you can put in pages. We could have gone for another 100 or 200 pages or more. But with Jacinda, if you were to dig and look for things that are negative, you wouldn't find very much, I don't think. There's nothing really that we found there that we looked at it and said, oh, this is troubling or this is worrisome or whatever. She talks about, the only thing that she talks about that is a worry is that she says that she suffers from anxiety, and she's been very open with that.
That's not a big issue. I mean, that's not even worth mentioning. I suffer with anxiety. So what? It doesn't mean that that's like, I used to fumble for words when I was in school and look at interviews. So it doesn't matter.
Not at all. But I mean, that's the only thing that came up is that's the only thing that we can look at that anyone said. And some people were saying, she suffers from anxiety. Perhaps she shouldn't be prime minister. But in actual fact, which is shown that kind of, what would you say, the pressure that she puts on herself, which is probably, what would you say, as a corollary of that anxiety, seems to help her performance as a prime minister. So she's actually a better leader because she cares so much, which is part of her putting too much pressure on herself.
As you say that, I mean, whatever I could personally feel from her voice is that I think, we all have different perceptions about people, but I think my background of interviewing the Nobel Peace Prize winners have kind of helped me to understand compassion in an altogether different way. And I now understand that how people behave. Like, I've also interviewed Aung San Suu Kyi. I know she's a very controversial person, but all I'm trying to, bring something here that I think I kind of understand that if that person is talking from the heart or they're just talking from the head.
Right.
So I think,
when you speak to a person, then you realize whether that person.
Yes, exactly. That is there any kind of sensitivity, and if your voice is numb and you're just, and you're just what, I mean, when I used to see children walking on the floor without shoes, and you take a pause and you feel it, then you also feel it, because you know that person is thinking, and you're trying to bring that person into some kind of memory portal where that person can get flashes and can ease and can tell you. So you know that the person is not faking, is telling you from the heart. And that is important. And that will show up, as I said. Why not, there are so many other leaders. Why not their speeches are not that important? Why don't I get goosebumps from listening to their speeches? And why there are few selected leaders that I feel like, okay, I'm having some goosebumps. So I think it's just about the intensity.
Well, I think one of the things that we find with politicians, as President Harry Truman allegedly said, always be sincere, even when you don't mean it. And that's what we've become used to with politicians. We've become used to politicians who speak nicely, but they do something different. They present themselves in this way, but they behave in that way. They promise this, but you get that. And what we've got...
We forget that they are accountable to the people who elect them,
They are exactly. They are politician means service to the people, and that's why you cannot have that air in your mind. And I don't know why I want to bring this up, because this is like such an important platform. Like Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is the former president of Liberia. And she is very close to Jacinda. And I mean, recently Jacinda did, a Skype call with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner of the year 2011. She used to mop floors in Liberia before becoming the president. She was a victim of domestic violence, and her husband used to beat her almost every day. And then, and there were times when she was just thrown inside a prison, and they were told that I'm going to burn you with a matchstick. Not the husband, but the military rule in that country. So-called the dictatorship rule in that country by like Charles Taylor. Why I want to bring this up is from that situation where you were mopping floors, I repeat, mopping floors of hotels, and then catapulting yourself to becoming the president, the first president of the entire, the first president of a country in the African continent. It's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And then if we say this point, that why this and why not that, and how come she became so, I think just about coming back, to the point that you do not have to have a certain set of skills to become a good politician. You can come from anywhere, and you can start from scratch and stay humble and dominate humbly. And you don't have to be, so that's the reason like Jacinda and like all the like-minded women leaders bond well, because they share the same human value. That's why Jacinda mania is so relevant.
Mm-hmm. So if I can ask you now, and that probably will be my last question, on the biggest achievement that she's had on controlling the pandemic, in her own way, which other leaders took notice. They wanted to learn from her. They wanted to understand, what is it that New Zealand did that we couldn't, right? And that is still going on to assess and understand what is it that she did differently. So, this chapter that you have, the COVID election, it's fascinating. You have a pandemic, and we know what is going on right now all over the world, especially in India right now. It's just as bad as it can get. But what do you really think, both of you, that world leaders, other leaders, be it the Indian Prime Minister Modi, or any other president or prime minister, what is it that this strong men, strong leaders need to learn from this lady? What is it that she did different that you think that others can really ponder upon? Yes, all countries are different. India is not the same as New Zealand.
Exactly.
Demographically and culturally and many other things. But
population-wise, yeah.
They can really learn from her.
Well, can I just preface my response on that by saying that New Zealand has benefited from geography. We're, in the southern countries, and Australia too, we're so far away from the rest of the world. It took quite a long time for COVID to reach there. So they benefited greatly from that, and also seeing how COVID played out in Italy and Spain, and as they said in one article, watching the Fiat in front of you run off the road. Gave them some benefit as to see how they should plan their COVID response. So that is one thing that should be understood, that they benefited from that. There's a relatively small population, 5 million people, which is, it's a drop in the ocean. That's something that's less than Chennai. So that also helps. The other thing that's helped is there's a unitary government. So those factors have very much played in favour of Jacinda's government. But what I think we should realise is this is ongoing. So we don't really know how the whole thing is going to pan out in the end. But what I feel about that Jacinda's legacy will be is one of a person who responds correctly to crises, not just this crisis, but a whole series of crises. She's there on the front line. She's consulting people. I think if I can say that that's something that everyone can take.
But she's very, very quick to take actions.
Quick to take actions.
Very quick. Absolutely. And do you remember that incident where she's standing and there's an earthquake? And she's like, "Oh, I'm just having a bit of earthquake here. Oh my God, these people will run. It's an earthquake. Go, lady." She's like, "Oh, I'm just having a bit of earthquake here." And, so it's just such a cute video about, okay, yeah, earthquake, fine. I mean, it's just about your own mental, some people are very, very impulsive and they want to do things quickly. And I think that is a part of her personality as well, to some extent, that she wants to take an action quickly and not just wait for ages to actually wait for the COVID-19, mutants to arrive and then take an action. It's just about taking a quick action because the presence of mind is so important.
She's on the front line. I think that's the interesting thing about Jacinda. She's on the front line. She's always on the front line and leading from the front at times when it's needed, but also at times when it's probably uncomfortable. She's leading from the front. And I think that goes back to her childhood. I mean, she's the daughter of a policeman who was always dealing with crises.
Policeman, yes, who never, tolerated violence against women, and he used to take all the domestic violence cases, and he was always about, equality. And then obviously it's just part in the genes. I think it's just about, I think the right parenting plays a wider role, but also I will highlight the importance of the school teachers and the college teachers. Yeah.
And the thing is, I think her legacy, and it shows out it plays out in COVID, but also in the previous crises, in the Christchurch shooting, mosque shooting, and the White Island volcanic explosion. In all of these crises, she's showed a kind of leadership that can be emulated. And that is, it's consultative, it's compassionate, it's decisive. And to have compassionate and decisive and consultative all at once is quite special. So I think I think all leaders can learn from that. A strong man might say, "This is the way we're going to go because I decided." Well, that would be wonderful if the strong man knows everything. But
the title of our book is Leading with Empathy. So
yes, absolutely. And what we find is that no one leader, if we look at what Jacinda does differently, I would say, now that I come to think about it, she was listening to her scientific advisors. She had a panel of people she was listening to, and she'd consult with them and use her good sense. So there's plenty of good sense in her. It's what would you say, native good sense. It's innate to have good sense. And it's been developed with her, but she consults with the relevant experts. She chooses the correct experts. She reads people very well. She consults with the experts and then comes to a decision that works. And I think that that's something that all leaders can do. Every leader of any kind should emulate that, particularly in a crisis, because no one person can have all the answers. Being a strong man or a strong woman is good, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's bad.
Taking steps, and she doesn't shy away from taking steps, and she doesn't think about all the calculations, and she just goes with her heart. I think it's important to do that.
And she's right on the spot. She's
right on the spot, and she just speaks her mind, and that is important.
And that's I find that amazing, because whenever there's a problem, it's as you said before. She turns the car around and says, right, let's get right to the police station or whatever it is. With White Island, she was there on as close as she could get within hours. This is just the way she is.
But also last, last but not the least, I'd really want to highlight this point that she came into politics for the sake of children. She really came into politics for the sake of children. She said, because politics, and I'm quoting Jacinda Ardern here, she said, politics is a place where you can make a difference. And I came here for the sake of the children, because she wants to give a better future. So I think when you feel that you are here for the children, you can actually very well judge a mindset of that person, that when that prime minister tells you that, oh, I wanted to become a clown. Why? Because they wanted to make children laugh. And I have not seen many presidents and prime ministers just exclusively stressing on children.
It'd be rather funny to see Trump say that.
The childlike innocence in her. I think it's just about the ethnic innocence also. She is tough, when she needs to be, but she's also a soft person. And as you said, that she's managing her family well, and she's managing her, office well. So it's not about, and often she shares about little drawings of, 2-year-old kid or 3-year-old kid on her social media. Oh, what this 3-year-old have drawn an elephant, with this whole trunk in a way, different. And, so this speaks about her personalities, and then you feel comfortable. Mentally, it just gives you some kind of stimulus that, we are all human, and it's okay to have all kind of things in your life, and yet not go from the path of compassion.
Sure. Well, on that note, Carl and Supriya, thank you so much.
I am so grateful to
once again, Jacinda Ardern.
Thanks very much, Niyalima.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
A fascinating conversation. It's the Prince soft cover. It's a HarperCollins publication, and I will request viewers to go pick up the book. If you know everything about her. You do not. You really need to read the book. And as I said, thank you so much for for me as a journalist, it's like as if I've now met this world leader. I know her.
Yes,
and that's exactly what we wanted.
Exactly, and yeah. We are all, we're just sharing this message. Yeah.
Keep up the good work, and congratulations, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.